What creepy experience or story haunts you to this day? 1. This isn't really a paranormal story, but I remember it so well. I was young, maybe 10 or 11, and home alone after school. I was working on my homework upstairs when someone rang the doorbell. Sometimes my friend down the street would come over, so I ran downstairs thinking it was her. There was a window above our door, and it was very high up, so usually I could stand at the top of the stairs and look through it to see who was at the door, at the top of their head. This time there was a man just looking through that window. It must have been 7 feet off the ground, and he was eyeline with it. He had a very round face, I remember, and a huge smile. It was something out of a horror movie. Then my cat, who I regularly call Slutty because he is so friendly, LOL, starts growling at him. My kitty was on the landing with me. He sees me at the top of the stair landing and just says, "Hi, I'm here to check for pests. Can you let me in?" I duck down and he says, "I saw you. I know your parents aren't home, but I need to come in." I still hear his voice clearly. I was terrified, and run down the stairs and into the kitchen to grab a phone. He keeps asking me to open the door. Finally I tell him something like, "No, you'll have to come back another time." He won't take no for answer, just keeps repeating himself. Then I tell him I'm going to call the police. All politeness out the window. Says something about me being rude, and that I'm stopping him from doing his job. I keep repeating that I will call the police, and he finally starts just screaming and cursing at me. And finally he slams his hand as hard as he can into the door. I start dialing, and he runs off calling me a bitch. I don't finish calling the police, and sit near our front door until my parents came home. I didn't even know what bitch meant. Didn't tell them because I thought I'd get in trouble. Definitely not as scary as others here, but I remember it so clearly. His weird smile, his head was perfectly round, and how he was so tall. I was really short as a kid. 2. When I was a kid in elementary school I had one best friend. We'll call him Jim. We were pretty much inseparable, and spent a ton of time at each other's houses. I loved when he came to my house. We'd play in my giant sandbox, or with my train set downstairs, or build snow forts in the winter. It was a blast. I wasn't as thrilled to go to his house, however. His mom was an absolute angel. Soft-spoken, incredibly kind, and she often took us fun places, water parks, toy store, museums, etc. They even had a pool. What made me apprehensive was his dad. He was a complete 180 from Jim's mom. Really tall, well over 6'0", perpetually grumpy, and had a booming bass voice that you could feel in the air when he spoke. He intimidated the living shit out of all the neighborhood kids that came over to Jim's house, including me. A good example of his ability to instill maximum fear simply by existing. I'd be over at Jim's house, walking down the hall to use their bathroom, and his dad would appear, coming from the opposite direction. He loomed over me like a giant, so I usually did my best to cower and try to be invisible as he went by. On more than one occasion, just as I was about to pass him, he spun on me and got right in my face, yelling, "What are you doing?" I'd stammer out that I had intended to use the bathroom, but no longer needed to since I'd pissed my pants. He'd straighten back up and continue walking, laughing to himself as he went. In hindsight I think he knew he scared the hell out of us, and enjoyed it. That being the case, I quickly learned to recognize the sound of his truck when he came home. I'd run to Jim's room and wouldn't come out until it was time to go home. The other thing that was scary as hell, Jim's dad and mom got into loud arguments all the time. I have to give her credit, Jim's mom would get right back in his face and not back down an inch. Still, anytime we'd hear them shouting from the other room, we both worried that we'd get it from Jim's dad for some unknown reason. To the best of my knowledge, nothing ever became physical, but oh man, the racket they made when they'd go at each other. Once during the summer when we were all playing around the pool, he approached me from behind, lifted me up, and tossed me into the deep end of the pool. I couldn't swim. I thrashed around wildly and was about to drown when Jim's mom dove in and pulled me out, giving her husband a nasty look. He just laughed to himself and wandered off. One winter day, Jim and I and his sister were out sledding in the backyard and the zipper of my snowsuit came off the track. I went inside and told Jim's mom, who told me his dad would fix it. I tried to say no, it's okay, but she was already calling down the stairs to him. The booming response from the basement, "Send him down." I went down those stairs as if I was living my final moments, all shaky and scared. There were almost no lights in the basement, just a single bulb hanging from a string in the workroom where he was located. "Come here," he boomed. I nervously stepped over and he bent down on one knee to take a look at the zipper. Even then he was still 3 feet taller than I was. He stood and walked over to his bench, returning with a pair of needle nose pliers. He put the wayward zipper back on its track, then bent so he was almost nose to nose with me. I was petrified. He took the pair of pliers, opened them up and placed them on my nose, then gave them a little bit of pressure. Just enough to where it almost hurt, but not quite. Then he removed them, stood, and chuckled like he always did. I must have done 140 miles per hour running up the stairs and back outside. As a little kid I'd never been more terrified. Fast forward age 15, 16. My folks and I had long since moved out of the area, and Jim and I hadn't spoken since about the 4th grade. My parents informed me that Jim's dad had been put on the Predator list for having underage child content on his home computer. They asked me if anything funny had ever happened during my time at Jim's house as a kid. I immediately recalled the nose pliers situation, and a chill went up my spine like you wouldn't believe. Thankfully I wasn't a victim, but my blood ran cold when they told me that. 3. This happened recently. I fly out to San Francisco every few months to work with one of my clients. It's a quick in and out trip, less than 24 hours. Up to this point I'd never had any experiences that made me feel uneasy, until this last one. I was staying in a new hotel that my client put me up in near the office, and I'm up on the 15th floor. I'm laying in bed, having a little trouble sleeping because the room kept getting too warm, so I'm just reading on my phone until I get tired enough to just pass out. The way I'm laying, I have one leg bent and the other crossed, like if I was sitting cross-legged in a chair, just laying down, which caused the blankets to bunch a bit at the end of the bed. Suddenly I feel something grab the end of the sheets and yank on them, straightening them out. At that point it suddenly felt like there was something heavy in the room, and I did not want to come out from under my covers, scared I would see something standing in the room. Needless to say, I did not sleep well and ended up getting maybe 3 hours total of sleep before I had to be up and head to the office. When I went downstairs, another artist that was there for the same in-office event met downstairs so we could head over together, and he asked how I slept. Told him what I experienced, and he said that he heard knocking in his room all night. We were both on the same floor. The third artist was on the 10th floor and didn't experience anything. I've tried to research the hotel and the area to figure out if it was maybe a repurposed building or if it was built recently from the ground up. Couldn't find anything on it besides a shooting that had happened outside the hotel a few years back. 4. So, I used to go out clubbing with my friends, often. Many times we'd take a drive to a far out city for the night, weekend. Anyway, we'd been planning to go to a specific city on an upcoming weekend, which neither myself nor my friends had ever been to before. It was a city about 4 hours drive away, and not some place you'd associate with us traveling to. So, in the week running up to the trip all plans were in motion. During that week I visited my dad and mom at the family home. And my dad in all seriousness tells me at the dining table about a dream he had, in which he had been called by the police of the city I'm traveling to on that weekend, saying that I died in a car crash. It was obvious that he'd been affected by this dream, as never ever has he mentioned anything like this before or expressed any fear for my personal safety. He's a pretty stoic person who isn't given to sentiment easily. Now please bear in mind that I'd not mentioned to my dad about my upcoming travels, and there's absolutely no way he would have found out from anyone else. When he told me this story, I didn't say much other than something like, "Okay, that's a weird dream." I didn't let on to him about my planned travels. But inside I was shook up by the coincidence. So much that I canceled my trip and vowed never to visit the city, just in case death is waiting for me there in some final destination type of way. 5. I have a hyperactive imagination, to the point of me thinking it could be some sort of mental illness. Coupled with me inheriting tons of anxiety from my grandmother both genetically and from her raising me, I had a lot of weird experiences as a kid. I remember specifically zombies would always scare the hell out of me, especially because I have regular nightmares of being put into zombie scenarios. I had one dream in middle school of me, my mom and my stepdad living in an apartment. The apartment was in the middle of a 3x3 apartment building and had a front door that led onto a patio. In my dream there was a news reporter talking about staying indoors and locking up your house because of zombies. For some reason my stepdad and a bunch of other guys did the opposite of this and went outside with guns. Then zombies came, ate them, then ate me. Dream ends, I wake up, no big deal. About a year later, me and my mom move into an apartment that looks just like the one from my dream. Like a straight up one-to-one. Only difference was we lived in the apartment above the one from my dream. Nothing ever happened while I was living there, but about 3 days after me and my mom moved out, the entire building burned down.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.